You slowly open your eyes, but nothing about the world around you feels familiar. For a moment, there is only a soft blur of dim shapes and muted light, as if your mind is trying to catch up with a place it does not recognize. The air is different here. It is colder than you expect, carrying a quiet stillness that feels heavy yet calm, as though the room itself is holding its breath. You are lying on something firm beneath you, not the soft comfort you might be used to, but something solid and unyielding. As your awareness returns, you begin to feel the roughness beneath your body. A simple bed, made of wood and layered with thick fabric that feels worn but functional. There is a faint scent around you, something earthy and old, like stone that has been closed off from sunlight for too long. Slowly, you turn your head. The movement feels slightly delayed, as if your body is still deciding whether it belongs here. The room comes into focus in pieces. Thick stone walls rise around you, uneven and heavy, their surfaces marked by time rather than decoration. The light is dim, filtering in weakly from a narrow opening somewhere ahead, not quite a window as you know it, but a slit carved into the stone that allows a thin trace of the outside world to enter. You do not hear anything at first, only silence, a deep, settled silence that feels different from empty quiet. It feels lived in, as though the absence of sound itself has weight. You become aware of your breathing, slow and slightly unsteady, blending into that stillness. As you continue to wake, you notice the cold more clearly. It is not harsh, but persistent, pressing gently against your skin and reminding you that warmth is not easily held here. You pull your attention inward for a moment, trying to understand how you arrived in this place, but there is no clear memory to hold on to. Only the sensation of having been placed here, as if the night itself carried you into this unfamiliar room. Your eyes adjust further, and more details emerge from the dimness. A wooden table stands against one wall, simple and sturdy. There is no decoration, only function. Nearby, a chair rests slightly askew, as if it had been used recently and left without much thought. The floor beneath you is stone as well, uneven in places, covered in a thin layer of woven material that softens it just enough to make the room livable. You begin to realize how still everything is, not abandoned, but paused, as though life here moves in slower rhythms that do not match your own sense of time. Even the air feels measured, drifting quietly through the room without urgency. You shift slightly, and the sound of fabric against wood breaks the silence for a brief moment, before fading again. That small sound feels unusually noticeable here, as if the room is listening. You pause, letting your body settle, and the stillness returns immediately, wrapping around you once more. There is no clear sense of danger, only unfamiliarity, a quiet acceptance from the space itself, as if it has no expectation of you, other than to simply exist within it. You remain still for a moment longer, letting your senses adjust fully to the cold stone, the muted light, and the deep, steady silence that defines this place. And as your awareness slowly stabilizes, you begin to understand that this is where the night begins for you. You remain still for a few moments longer, letting the feeling of the room settle fully into your awareness. The cold does not fade, but it becomes more familiar, like a quiet presence rather than an interruption. As you shift slightly on the bed, you feel the texture beneath you more clearly now. The wood frame creaks faintly, not loudly, but just enough to remind you that everything here responds to weight and movement in a very direct way. You slowly sit up, and the air feels even cooler against your skin. There is no soft transition of warmth like in a modern room. Instead, the temperature is constant, shaped by stone that has absorbed the chill of the night and held onto it without resistance. Your hands press lightly against the bedding, feeling the uneven layers of cloth and worn padding. It is functional, not indulgent, designed for rest rather than comfort. As your eyes continue adjusting, the room becomes clearer in its simplicity. The stone walls are not smooth but layered with imperfections, each line and groove suggesting time rather than craftsmanship meant for appearance. In places, the stones do not align perfectly, creating small shadows that shift slightly as the faint light changes. You notice how the light itself behaves differently here. It does not fill the room evenly. Instead, it arrives in narrow paths, soft and hesitant, as if it is unsure how far it is allowed to spread. You glance toward the narrow opening in the wall again. Through it, only a pale suggestion of the outside world can be seen. No clear landscape, only a muted glow that hints at distance and open air beyond these walls. The light entering through it is weak but steady, giving just enough visibility to understand your surroundings without fully revealing them. The air carries subtle differences in temperature as you move. Near the walls, it feels colder, almost still. Closer to the center of the room, there is a faint circulation, barely noticeable unless you focus on it. It makes you aware of how enclosed the space truly is, how carefully shaped it is to contain warmth when it exists, and how easily it loses it when it does not. You place your feet onto the stone floor. The moment you do, the cold rises through you in a quiet, direct way. There is no insulation beneath, only the immediate reality of stone meeting skin. You adjust your weight slowly, letting yourself get used to the sensation. The floor is not uncomfortable in a sharp sense, but it is firm in a way that demands attention, reminding you that every surface here is built for durability rather than softness. A faint draft moves through the room again, subtle enough that you might miss it if you were not paying attention. It passes near your shoulder, then fades toward the corner where the shadows deepen slightly. You realize that the room is not sealed from the outside world. It breathes in its own quiet way, shaped by stone and narrow openings that allow just enough exchange with the outside air. You turn your head slightly, taking in the rest of the space once more. There are no unnecessary objects, only a few essential pieces arranged with purpose. Everything has a place, and everything serves a function. The simplicity begins to feel less like emptiness and more like a kind of order that does not require explanation. For a moment, you remain seated on the edge of the bed, suspended between waking and stillness. The silence around you continues, unbroken and steady, as if it has always been here and always will be. It does not demand your attention, but it holds it gently, without effort. And in that quiet, stone-bound room, you begin to understand the stillness not as absence, but as the natural state of this place. You stay seated for a while longer, letting the quiet settle into something more familiar. The cold air remains steady, but your awareness of it shifts. It is no longer surprising, only present, like a constant thread running through the room. You slowly lift your gaze toward the narrow opening in the wall again, watching the faint light that barely reaches inside. At first, Nothing changes. The room feels frozen in its stillness. But then, very gradually, you begin to notice something beyond the silence. A subtle shift in the atmosphere, not loud enough to be called a sound at first, but more like the suggestion of movement carried from somewhere outside the stone walls. It arrives in faint waves, passing through the thick structure in softened form. You listen more carefully now. The silence is still dominant, but it is no longer absolute. There is a distant presence of the outside world, filtered and weakened by distance and stone. A soft brushing sound appears briefly, then fades, as if the wind itself is moving through narrow passages you cannot see. You remain very still, allowing your senses to adjust again. The room responds to even the smallest awareness. The wooden bed beneath you does not move, but you become more conscious of how solid everything is. Nothing here shifts easily. Everything resists change unless it is intentional. Another faint sound reaches you, this time slightly lower in tone. It could be wind moving along the exterior of the castle, pressing gently against stone surfaces before slipping away. It does not repeat in a predictable rhythm. Instead, it comes and goes in uneven intervals, as if the night itself is breathing in slow, irregular patterns. You notice how your perception of silence begins to change. It is no longer empty, it is layered. Beneath the quiet, there are faint traces of life or environment that exist just beyond your immediate space. The stone walls do not block them completely. They transform them into something distant and softened. A slight creak echoes somewhere far away. It is not close enough to identify, and it does not repeat. You find yourself listening for a response that does not come. The castle feels large in a way that is difficult to fully measure from within this single room. It holds space beyond what you can see, and that space seems to carry its own quiet life. You shift your position slightly on the bed again, and the movement creates a soft, brief sound that feels amplified in the stillness. For a moment, you pause, noticing how quickly the room returns to silence afterward. It does not hold onto sound. It releases it almost immediately, leaving no trace behind. Outside, the faint wind returns again, a little more noticeable this time. It moves along the edges of the narrow opening, creating a barely audible whisper that rises and falls in uneven patterns. You begin to understand it not as a disturbance, but as part of the environment's rhythm. A rhythm that is slow, unpredictable, and deeply quiet. The air inside the room remains unchanged, cold and steady, yet your awareness of it feels more sensitive now. Each subtle movement, each faint sound from beyond the stone becomes part of a larger sense of presence. You are not alone in the space, even though nothing visible shares the room with you. The silence never fully breaks. It only shifts, revealing faint layers beneath itself. And as you continue to listen, the night begins to feel less like emptiness and more like a vast, quiet structure surrounding you on all sides. You slowly lie back down on the bed, letting your body settle into the firm surface again. The movement is careful, almost hesitant, as if you are still learning how this place responds to you. The wooden frame gives a faint, tired sound as your weight shifts, then returns immediately to silence. The stillness around you absorbs it without effort. For a moment, you close your eyes, expecting rest to come easily. But the cold does not allow you to forget where you are. It lingers gently against your skin, reminding you that comfort here is not something that arrives quickly. You adjust the thin layers beneath you, pulling them closer without fully understanding whether they will make any real difference. The room remains unchanged. The stone walls hold their quiet presence, and the narrow opening continues to offer only a faint suggestion of outside light. Somewhere beyond it, the wind still moves, but it feels more distant now, as if the night itself has deepened. You try to relax your body fully, letting your shoulders drop and your breathing slow. Each breath feels slightly more noticeable in the silence, as though even that simple rhythm is something the room is aware of. There is no interruption, only continuation, an unbroken flow of quiet that surrounds you completely. After a while, your attention begins to drift, not toward sleep, but toward the small details you had not fully noticed before. The unevenness of the stone beneath the bed frame, the way the cold seems slightly stronger near the outer wall, the faint texture of the fabric beneath your hands, worn and practical, shaped more by use than by comfort. You shift slightly again, trying to find a position that feels more settled. The bed responds with a soft creak that quickly fades into the stillness. You pause afterward, almost instinctively, as if waiting for the room to react, but it does not. It simply returns to its steady quiet, unchanged and patient. There is a strange rhythm to your attempts at rest. Each small adjustment feels more noticeable than it would elsewhere. Not because it is loud, but because the surrounding silence is so complete that even minor sounds stand out briefly before dissolving. You begin to realize that sleep here is not something that arrives quickly or easily. It is something that happens gradually, without urgency, shaped by the environment rather than resisting it. The cold, the stone, and the silence all contribute to a kind of stillness that does not invite comfort, but allows endurance. Outside, the faint wind returns once more, brushing along the unseen exterior of the castle. It does not enter fully, only touches the edges of awareness before fading again. You listen to it without moving, letting it pass through your thoughts without attachment. Your body begins to grow heavier, not from warmth, but from quiet exhaustion. The effort of simply existing in this still environment slowly becomes something you stop resisting. You are no longer trying to change the room or adjust it. You are simply in it, letting it be what it is. The silence remains unbroken, but it no longer feels sharp or unfamiliar. It has become part of the space you occupy, surrounding you without pressure. And as you lie there, you begin to understand that rest in this place is not about comfort, but about surrendering slowly to the stillness itself. The stillness deepens as you remain lying in the same position, your body slowly adjusting to the idea that nothing in this room is meant to change quickly. The cold air feels slightly more settled now, no longer shifting in small drafts, but resting evenly across the space like something that has fully accepted the night. Your thoughts become quieter without you trying to quiet them. They do not disappear, but they slow, stretching into longer pauses between each awareness of sound or sensation. The castle around you feels further away and closer at the same time, as if distance here is not measured in space, but in layers of silence. From somewhere beyond the walls, a faint sound returns. It is not distinct enough to identify clearly, but it carries a sense of continuation, like life moving gently through stone corridors. It does not interrupt the night. It belongs to it. You do not react to it anymore, Only acknowledge it briefly before letting it fade back into the background. The narrow opening in the wall shows only darkness now, with the faintest suggestion of cool light that no longer feels like day or night, but something in between. Time outside seems to have softened just as much as time inside. There is no urgency in it, only passage. You adjust your hands slightly beneath the thin coverings, feeling the worn texture once again. Even that small movement feels slower than before, as though your body has begun to match the pace of the environment. The wooden frame beneath you remains steady, offering no comfort beyond stability. The silence grows fuller, not because it increases, but because you begin to notice how many small sounds exist within it. The subtle shift of air through unseen gaps in stone. The faint settling of the structure itself, almost imperceptible, like a building resting after holding its shape through long hours. You do not think of sleep as something approaching. Instead, it feels like a gradual fading of edges. Your awareness of the room softens first, then the awareness of your body, then even the awareness of thought begins to lose sharpness, becoming less defined with each passing moment. A distant sound appears again, softer than before. It might be movement, or it might simply be the castle adjusting itself to the night. Either way, it does not draw your attention for long. It exists, and then it does not. The cold remains constant, but it no longer feels like something separate from you. It has become part of the overall sensation of the room, blending with the silence and the stillness until it is no longer easily distinguishable. Everything merges into a single quiet atmosphere. You find yourself noticing less and less, not because there is nothing to notice, but because your attention no longer lingers on any one detail. Each impression passes through you gently, without resistance, and leaves almost no trace behind. The castle feels vast in this moment, not in scale, but in depth, as if every wall, every corridor, every unseen chamber is resting in the same slow rhythm. Nothing feels active, yet nothing feels absent either. It is all simply paused in a shared quiet. Your breathing remains steady, almost blending with the room itself. Each inhale and exhale feels less like a conscious action, and more like something happening on its own, supported by the stillness around you. And as the night continues to deepen, your awareness begins to soften even further, drifting closer to a quiet that does not require attention to exist. You remain in that half-drifting state, where the room no longer feels sharply defined, but instead exists as a soft, continuous presence around you. The stone walls are still there, the bed still holds your weight, and the cold still lingers. Yet everything feels slightly farther away, as if your awareness has stepped back just enough to observe without fully engaging. The silence deepens again, but this time it carries a different quality. It is not only emptiness or stillness, it feels like endurance, like something that has been repeated so many times that it no longer needs attention. The castle does not feel new or old in this moment. It simply feels established, as if this kind of night is its natural state. You notice how little changes here, even over time. The faint sounds that once seemed separate now feel like part of a larger pattern that never truly begins or ends. Somewhere beyond the walls, something shifts faintly again. But you do not search for it anymore. It passes through your awareness and dissolves without effort. Your body remains still, but your sense of it becomes less detailed. The weight of your arms, the position of your legs, even the contact with the bed, all blend into a single continuous feeling rather than individual points of awareness. It is not discomfort. It is simply reduction, a quiet narrowing of attention. The room itself feels unchanged, yet your perception of it continues to soften. The narrow opening in the wall is now only a faint difference in darkness, barely separating inside from outside. Whatever light once filtered through it has become indistinct, absorbed into the deeper tone of the night. You begin to understand something without forming it into clear thought. Life here is not defined by comfort or ease. It is defined by persistence. The walls, the furniture, the silence, even the cold, all seem designed not to respond to you, but to exist independently of you. You are simply within it. A distant sound returns again, but it feels even more removed than before. It could be movement, or the settling of wood, or simply the castle adjusting to its own structure. You do not try to interpret it now. It does not ask to be understood. It only passes through the night briefly and fades. Your awareness of time becomes thinner. There is no sense of progression, only continuation. Each moment feels similar to the last, yet slightly more distant, as if you are moving deeper into the same stillness, rather than moving forward through it. The cold air no longer feels like something pressing against you. It is simply present, like the silence, like the stone, like the faint, distant sounds that come and go without emphasis. Everything has become part of the same quiet environment, without separation. You do not resist anything now, not the cold, not the silence, not even the heaviness in your body that suggests rest is approaching. There is no effort to change your position or adjust your surroundings. Everything has settled into acceptance, quiet and unspoken. The castle feels larger in this state, not because it expands, but because your awareness of it becomes less focused. It is no longer a collection of rooms and corridors in your mind. It becomes a single continuous presence, holding the night in place without interruption. And as that sense of quiet endurance surrounds you, your awareness begins to soften even further, drifting closer to a place where thoughts no longer hold their shape. The night feels heavier now, not in a way that presses down on you, but in a way that slows everything around you. Even the silence seems to have deepened into something more stable, more settled, as if the castle has fully entered its resting state and no longer expects anything to change until morning. You remain still, but the boundary between awareness and rest continues to blur. Thoughts arrive less frequently now, and when they do, they feel distant, like echoes rather than active ideas. The room is still present, but your connection to it feels softer, less precise. The cold remains, yet it no longer draws your attention in the same way. It is simply part of the atmosphere, like the stone beneath you, like the darkness beyond the narrow opening in the wall. Everything feels evenly distributed, nothing demanding focus. You become aware of a quiet acceptance forming within you, not a decision, not a realization, but something that develops slowly through stillness. The understanding that this environment does not need to be changed or resisted. It simply is, and you are within it for now. The faint sounds from beyond the room appear less distinct than before. When they do occur, they feel more like distant impressions than actual events. A shift in space, a movement in air, the soft suggestion of activity somewhere far away. They pass through the silence without disturbing it. Your body feels heavier, not in discomfort, but in release. The effort of maintaining awareness begins to fade. Even small adjustments no longer feel necessary. The bed beneath you remains firm and unchanged, offering no additional comfort, yet it no longer feels important whether it does or does not. The castle around you seems to have reached its most quiet state, not empty, but reduced. All activity beyond this room feels distant and minimal, as though the entire structure has slowed its rhythm to match the depth of the night. You notice how even your breathing feels less separate now. It blends into the environment more naturally, no longer something you observe closely. It simply continues, steady and unremarkable. There is a brief moment where awareness returns slightly sharper, and in that moment you recognize how deeply still everything has become. The silence is no longer something you experience actively. It is simply the condition of the space you occupy. Then that clarity softens again, fading gently as quickly as it appeared. The room remains unchanged. The stone walls hold their quiet presence without movement. The faint opening in the wall shows only darkness now, with no remaining trace of light or motion. Time feels suspended rather than passing. You are no longer trying to settle into rest. Instead, rest feels like something that is already happening gradually, without instruction or effort. The distinction between being awake and not fully awake becomes less meaningful. The castle continues its quiet existence around you, vast and still, with only the faintest suggestion that anything else exists beyond this moment. And as the night holds steady in its deepest calm, your awareness begins to drift even further into softness, where thoughts no longer form clearly and stillness becomes complete. The stillness does not change, yet something in it feels even more distant now, as if you are no longer resting inside the room, but slightly removed from it, observing it from a softened edge of awareness. The stone walls remain where they are. The bed remains beneath you, but everything feels quieter in a way that is difficult to measure. Your thoughts no longer form into anything complete. They arrive in fragments, then dissolve before they can settle. The silence around you is so consistent that even these fragments feel out of place, like faint ripples that disappear almost as soon as they appear. The cold air continues its steady presence, though you barely register it now. It no longer stands out against your skin or your breath. It simply exists as part of the same unchanging environment that has held you through the night. Nothing in it demands attention anymore. You lie still, and stillness feels less like an action and more like a condition you have merged into. The bed beneath you remains firm, unchanged, offering no softness beyond what you have already adapted to. Even that awareness fades in and out, as if it is not fully necessary to hold on to. Somewhere far beyond the walls, there is the faintest suggestion of movement again. It is weaker than before, almost indistinguishable from the silence itself. You do not turn toward it, do not follow it. It passes through your awareness like a passing thought and disappears. The castle feels especially large now, not in structure but in quietness, as though every corridor, every chamber, every stone passage has entered the same state of reduced motion. Nothing feels active, yet nothing feels absent either. It is all simply paused in a shared stillness that stretches through everything. Your awareness of time becomes even less defined. There is no sense of waiting, no sense of progress, only continuation. Each moment blends into the next without distinction, like water merging into still water. You notice how your body feels less separate from the space around it. The sensation of lying down is no longer something you actively register. It is simply part of the environment, like the stone, like the silence, like the faint darkness that fills the corners of the room. The narrow opening in the wall is now only a shape within darkness. No light passes through it anymore, or if it does, it is too faint to distinguish from the surrounding night. It no longer serves as a reminder of the outside world. It has become part of the stillness. You do not resist anything. Not the quiet, not the cold, not the gradual softening of awareness itself. Everything continues without interruption, without need for response. The castle remains present, but its presence feels distant now, as though it is no longer surrounding you directly, but holding space far beyond your immediate perception. You are still within it, yet that fact feels less important with each passing moment. Even thought itself becomes optional, no longer something that forms with consistency. Instead, there are only brief impressions, each one fading before it can fully settle. And as the night continues its slow, uninterrupted stillness, your awareness drifts further into a place where even silence no longer needs to be noticed. There is a subtle shift you do not notice at first, something so gradual that it blends seamlessly into the stillness around you. The darkness in the room begins to feel slightly less complete, not because anything clearly changes, but because the absence of light no longer feels absolute. It softens, almost imperceptibly. You remain lying still, your body quiet and unmoving, yet your awareness begins to return in faint, uneven layers. Not fully awake, not fully asleep, but suspended somewhere in between, where the night feels less heavy than before. The silence remains, but it is no longer as deep as it was earlier. It carries a faint openness now, as if something in the distance has begun to shift without announcement. You do not yet know what it is, only that the feeling of endless stillness has slightly loosened its hold. Your thoughts are still slow, but they begin to reassemble in gentle fragments. Not full ideas, just brief awareness of existence, of space, of the room still surrounding you. The stone walls are still there, still cold, still unmoving, but they feel slightly less distant now. You notice the air differently again. It is still cold, but there is a faint variation in it, as if the temperature has softened by the smallest degree. It does not bring comfort in any strong sense, but it signals change, however minimal. From somewhere beyond the walls, the night sounds are quieter than before, but they feel more distant in a different way now, as though they are slowly receding rather than simply fading. The castle is not waking, yet it is no longer in its deepest state of stillness. You remain motionless, allowing this transition to pass through you without reaction. There is no need to adjust, no need to respond. You simply exist within the change as it unfolds. The narrow opening in the wall begins to show a faint difference in tone again. Not light exactly, but a subtle shift in darkness, where one shade begins to separate itself from another. It is the first suggestion that the night is no longer at its deepest point. Your awareness slowly becomes more structured again. Sensations return with slightly more clarity. The texture of the bed beneath you feels more distinct. The firmness of the stone floor in memory remains present, though distant. Even the silence begins to feel less uniform. Yet nothing is sudden. Everything moves with patience, as if the entire environment is easing itself forward rather than changing outright. You do not feel fully awake, but you are no longer fully drifting either. There is a gentle return of presence, soft and unforced, as though your awareness is being guided back by the gradual shift of time itself. The castle remains still, but its stillness now feels lighter than before, less absolute, more open to change. The sense of deep night begins to loosen, though it has not yet given way to morning. And as this subtle transition continues, you remain quietly suspended within it, neither resisting nor following, simply carried along by the slow return of the world around you. The change does not announce itself, it simply continues, slowly becoming clearer the longer you remain still. The darkness in the room is no longer complete. It carries a faint softness now, as if the edges of the night are beginning to loosen their hold on the space. You remain lying in the same position, but your awareness is more present again, gently anchored to the room. The stone walls are still cold, still unmoving, but they no longer feel as distant as they did in the deepest part of the night. There is a subtle shift in how you perceive them, as if they are slowly re-emerging from silence. The air feels slightly different, still cool, still quiet, but no longer as heavy. It moves with a faint ease that suggests time is progressing beyond stillness. You do not need to think about it for long to notice that something outside the narrow opening must be changing as well. A faint brightness begins to gather there, not direct light yet, but the first suggestion of morning. It is soft and uneven, blending with the darkness rather than replacing it. You watch it without moving, your attention slowly becoming more grounded in the present moment. The silence is still present, but it has thinned. It no longer feels like something that surrounds you completely. Instead, it feels layered, with space opening within it for subtle shifts of sound that no longer feel out of place. You become more aware of your body again. The weight of resting on the bed feels clearer, though still calm. The cold remains, but it is no longer as sharp or defining as it was earlier in the night. It is simply part of the environment, not something that dominates it. From somewhere far beyond the room, there is a faint sense of renewed movement, but it is not yet distinct. It feels like the castle is slowly transitioning rather than awakening fully. The change is gradual, almost respectful in its pace. Your thoughts return more fully now, though still soft and unhurried. You are no longer drifting in deep stillness, but you are also not fully alert. You exist in a calm in-between state, where awareness and rest overlap gently. The narrow opening in the wall now holds a clearer difference in tone. The darkness there is beginning to separate from something lighter beyond it. It is not yet bright, but it is no longer fully night either. You remain still, simply observing this slow transformation. There is no urgency in it. Nothing demands action. Everything unfolds at its own steady rhythm, as if the castle itself is waking without disturbance. The room around you feels more defined again. The textures, the shapes, the stone surfaces all become slightly more visible as the faint light strengthens in the distance. Yet everything remains calm, unchanged in structure, only shifting in perception. And as this quiet emergence of morning continues, you find yourself gently returning with it, held between the end of night and the beginning of day. You remain lying still as the room slowly reveals itself in softer detail. The faint light that had only been a suggestion now lingers a little longer, gently outlining the edges of the stone walls. Nothing becomes bright all at once. Instead, everything seems to ease into visibility, as if the castle is carefully remembering how to be seen again. Your awareness feels steadier now, not fully awake, not fully resting, but quietly present in a way that feels more connected to the space around you. The bed beneath you is still firm, still simple, yet it no longer feels unfamiliar. It feels understood, accepted as part of this place, rather than something you are struggling against. The cold remains in the air, but it has softened. It no longer defines the room. It simply exists within it, less dominant, less demanding of attention. You notice how even your breathing feels easier now, no longer shaped by deep stillness, but by a slow return to movement in the world beyond the walls. The narrow opening in the stone shows more than it did before. A pale, muted glow spreads across it, not sharp or direct, but wide and gentle. It suggests that somewhere outside, the night has loosened its grip completely, even if the sun itself is not yet fully visible from where you lie. You do not move right away. Instead, you remain in this quiet in-between state, letting your thoughts gather naturally. The deep silence of the night is still present in memory, but it feels distant now, like something that happened far away rather than moments ago. The castle feels different in this light, not changed in structure, but changed in mood. The stillness is still there, yet it is no longer absolute. It carries openness now, a sense that life will soon begin to move through it again, slowly and without rush. You begin to reflect without forcing it, not in words, but in impressions. The cold stone, the narrow space, the layered silence of the night, all of it feels like a continuous experience rather than separate moments. There was no true separation between you and the environment, only gradual adaptation. The idea of survival does not feel dramatic here. It feels quiet, simple endurance within a place that asks only for presence, not resistance. You did not overcome the night. You moved through it, as everything here seems to do. Outside, the light grows a little more stable, still soft, still early, but more certain than before. It touches the edges of the room gently, revealing textures in the stone that were hidden in darkness. The space feels larger now, not because it has changed, but because it is visible again. You take a slow breath, noticing how naturally it comes now compared to earlier. The weight of the night has not vanished, but it has shifted into memory rather than presence. There is a calm understanding settling within you, not of place or time, but of experience itself. You have spent a night here, in silence, in cold, in stillness, and now it is easing into its next form without urgency. And as you remain quietly in that gentle transition, the sense of reflection becomes softer, allowing everything to simply be, without needing explanation or meaning beyond the experience itself. The light outside continues to grow, not quickly, but in a steady, patient way that feels natural to the space. It does not flood the room or erase the shadows all at once. Instead, it gently reshapes them, thinning the darkness until every corner of the stone chamber becomes easier to understand at a glance. You remain still for a little longer, allowing your awareness to fully settle into this calmer state. The bed beneath you feels familiar now, not as something uncomfortable or foreign, but simply as part of the environment you have existed within for the night. The firmness of it no longer stands out. It blends into everything else, The cold air is still present, but it has softened into something mild and distant. It no longer pulls attention toward itself. It is just part of the morning atmosphere that is slowly forming inside the castle walls. Even the silence has changed. It is no longer deep or heavy. It is lighter now, open enough that the faintest distant sounds feel natural rather than unusual. Through the narrow opening, the world outside is more visible, though still muted. A pale morning has arrived, gentle and quiet, spreading itself across unseen spaces beyond the stone. You do not rush toward it. You simply observe it from where you are, still resting, still calm. For a moment, you think about the night that has passed, but even that thought feels soft and unforced. It is not something that demands interpretation. It simply exists as a completed experience, held gently in your memory without weight. The castle around you feels different in this light, not transformed, but revealed. The same stone, the same structure, the same quiet strength, now seen under a softer sky. Everything feels more grounded, more real in a way that does not require attention to hold it together. You begin to move slightly, slowly adjusting your position on the bed. The movement is unhurried, almost instinctive. There is no rush to leave the space, only a quiet readiness to acknowledge that the night has fully passed. As you sit more upright, the room responds only with stillness. It does not resist your movement, nor does it acknowledge it. It simply continues to exist as it always has, unchanged by your presence but gently shaped by the passage of time. You take one final moment to look around. The stone walls, the simple furnishings, the narrow window of light, all of it feels complete in its simplicity. There is nothing missing, nothing added. Only the quiet truth of a place that holds nights and mornings without interruption. And as you sit there in the soft morning light, the experience settles fully within you, not as something dramatic or distant, but as a calm memory of time spent inside stillness within the quiet life of a medieval castle, where the night passed slowly and the world outside waited gently for the morning to arrive.